be interviewing him on gross national happiness as a mandate of state, its successes and its applicability to other states. So to begin with, there is a significant amount of apathy I found and skepticism perhaps, among the youth about the concept and implementation of gross national happiness. What is being done to democratize the idea of gross national happiness? How are academics, policymakers and government in opposition reaching out to the grassroots to bridge this communication gap?
Gross national happiness is a development philosophy that was conceived by the fourth king almost 40 years ago. And during his reign, 34 years of reign, the idea of gross national happiness was widely accepted by the people, by all segments of the people. Whether we understood it or not, we accepted the basic principle of gross national happiness that says that we cannot be blinded by economic pursuit of economic goals. We can't be blinded by that to such an extent that we may sacrifice other assets that are important to people's life. So during the reign of our kings, absolute reign of our kings, nobody had any doubts. And now, in a democratic setup, the whole idea of democracy is that people question, engage, and interact in the development process. And on the one hand, it's good if our youth are questioning GNH and perhaps are not accepting it blindly, lock, stock and barrel. On the other hand, it perhaps shows that the government in particular, but we, the older generation, in general, need to do a lot more. Number one, to articulate, to understand what GNH is within ourselves. Number two, to articulate that to our youth. And number three, together to build a consensus, to forge a consensus of what GNH is, and then rally around that concept and work towards a better Bhutan.
Do you think that there's this hyper-intellectualization of the concept, or do you think that that's just how it looks outwardly to people?
There's a danger of that. Any concept, any idea risks either being stolen in the realm of scholarship or being oversimplified. And GNH is just like that. Some oversimplify it. The others would think that only academicians are authorized to speak about it. So there is a risk, but it's the risk in either way.
Okay, thank you. I've forgotten my dictaphone. May I have that in case? Thank you.
Would you like some coffee?
No, thank you.
Tea or water?
No, thank you. Would you?
Nothing?
No,
sure? Okay.
My excuse is I got 4 hours sleep. Okay. Right. So, I've asked the same set of questions to Lynchen because I thought it would be interesting to compare. Okay. So, from the perspective of political philosophy, do you believe that gross national happiness is a holistic and unifying solution to the liberal, conservative and socialist divide? Do you think it's a superior way of viewing the world because it combines 3 seemingly irreconcilable standpoints in a way that calls for critical assessment and application?
Are those 3 viewpoints irreconcilable?
Well, they're seemingly so.
It appears so. If it is, then who would attempt to reconcile them? And I don't think any one idea can encompass all other ideas. GNH is an idea that has worked in Bhutan. GNH is an idea that we are very protective about in Bhutan. We must nurture it. And there are other ideas out there, whether it's conservative, liberals, socialists, communism. These are other ideas. And they have worked in some instances. In some instances they've had difficulties. And GNH is an idea. It is working here. This is not to say that this idea is superior to any other political idea.
So how would you place it in the political spectrum?
GNH, the way it is working at the moment, is center, and it has it reaches out to both sides.
Okay.
So it's quite broad.
Thank you. Also,
that said, it's not easy, because perhaps one of the strengths of GNH is that it is not linear. Or rather, it's not a point on a linear scale. And this is what makes GNH interesting, that it can be a bit of on the left and a bit on the right, and then you're on the center, and perhaps if you have a vertical axis also. And it could encompass a whole range of political priorities and social priorities.
That's very heartening. So, how is acceptable happiness-producing behavior determined?
Sorry?
How is acceptable happiness-producing behavior determined?
That you need to ask academicians.
Okay. So, moving on to the first pillar, sustainable and equitable economic development. How is the state limited in size so as not to crowd out the private sector or press down upon civil society?
A question for the government. I believe that we need to ensure that the state is able to deliver quality and comprehensive services, but not at the risk of crowding out the private sector. I believe that we need to have a vibrant private sector and an economy that is both wide and deep, not limited to a few industries, a private sector that allows Bhutanese people to engage in matters of the economy and to take part in economic development. And therefore, the state has important responsibilities to guarantee quality, free and quality education, to guarantee free and quality healthcare, to guarantee the security of the nation. But in other areas where our economy is weak, where the private sector is weak, perhaps the state can play a role there is a role to encourage the growth of the private sector. And if that is also not there, then perhaps the state can play a leadership role. But these are all dangerous and must be done so with a lot of care, because the state cannot engage in work that the private sector should be doing. And the moment the state starts doing more and more, then it simply crowds out the private sector. It makes the private sector less competitive and less eager, and perhaps even feel that it's not necessary.
That makes a lot of sense. Okay. So how is the market constrained in a way that does not impede its efficiency but take into account individual welfare and externality costs?
How does the market?
How is the market? Now this is from the other side, right? We've spoken about the limitation of the state.
Mm-hmm.
But now this is how is the market constrained in a way that does not impede its efficiency but takes into account individual welfare and externality costs?
This is in the context of GNH?
Yes.
I still didn't understand the question.
Like, we all believe in a free market.
Okay. So the question is, do we constrain markets?
Yes. take into account externality costs and individual welfare?
The government, well, the government's fiscal policies, for instance, right now, right now our markets are not very big. Okay, so rather than constraining them, we should be nurturing them. Private sector is not big. So the need of the hour is not to constrain private sector development, it is to nurture it. That said, we need to ensure that the rewards of a market economy and the rewards of the private sector are equally distributed. How do you do that? Like everywhere else, through taxation and through other policies, through labor policies and other interventions. But these interventions are quite common throughout the world.
And what about
I don't think that there are any specific interventions that Bhutan is doing that is really different. That's really unique to Bhutan.
Okay. And what if you need the private sector obviously to blossom, but what if something comes at the cost of a certain amount of degradation to the environment? That
you'd imagine that any nation, not just Bhutan, has a set of policies based on which the country is going to move forward. So if their country environment is not a top priority, that will percolate and that will determine how business is conducted. In Bhutan, environment is a priority. So therefore, free market economy within the Bhutanese context would mean that policies regarding environment will be stringent, relatively stringent, and they will be applied to industries.
Thank you. Also, how is equity arrived at or facilitated?
In Bhutan?
Yes, in your opinion.
Yeah, you asked about taxes, labor. I don't want to go into detail now. Okay. The main education, free healthcare, access to rural communities, and then you have taxes, the labor policies, labor laws, employment policies, employment opportunity generation, expanding the economic base, okay, but ensuring that the rewards are not limited to a few people. So that would allow more access, creating opportunity.
Okay, let's play devil's advocate. Right? Keynes said that in the long run, we're all dead. How can we harvest our natural capital in such a way that it is fair for the present generation as well? It's about intergenerational.
Okay, say that again,
Okay, so let's play devil's advocate, right? Because we're very concerned about our resources. So John Maynard Keynes said that in the long run, we're all dead. So, how can we harvest our natural capital in such a way that it is fair for the present generation too?
You're talking about religious philosophies, yeah, and public policy. What's the purpose of life? And is this life, in this life, is that all we have? Do we work ourselves as slaves for the benefit of future generations because this time on earth is all we have? Or do we enjoy ourselves hedonistically so that because this is all the time we have and we don't care about future generation? Or is there an afterlife? Do we invest in that afterlife? It's not as simple as what Keynes would have said. But I do believe that there should be a balance. And that goes back to Tshering now again. So if if people invest in spirituality, regardless of their faith, is it economically productive? Some would argue that there is some, it would feature in the GDP, yeah? But by and large, perhaps not. Yet at the same time, is it desirable? I think it is. So the realm of spirituality cannot just find room in GDP and economics, and so the way it is handled in public policy, I think we've got to be cautious. We want people, I think, all over the world to be to exercise spirituality, regardless. You could be a person who doesn't believe in any God, an afterlife, but you want that person also to appreciate and live and even propagate so-called good values, universally accepted good values.
And what about the harvesting of natural capital, like your resources? How do you make it so that you're not conserving everything, but that you're also living? Because everybody has like a subjective reality in this life, right? Because everybody needs a certain standard of living. So how do you draw that balance?
What standard of living is required? If expectations of so-called higher standards of living and what is required of that, which is to